So with that, if you are coming into this call, let's say the Monday through Wednesday has been phenomenal. We'd love to hear those wins. And maybe you're joining this call tonight and maybe you just need somebody else's win. So if that is the case, we'd love to hear what is your win, but also what have you learned the last 7 days? Because quite frankly, business moves super fast. And so maybe you're coming into tonight with a win. Some of you might actually be coming in with a lesson learned. And as we go over the next 60 minutes, I'd really encourage you to keep that finger on the pulse of that reaction button and what questions you have for what we are doing, not only the content that's being shared, but also what do you need to know about your business? And let's attack those things together. So with that, if I can get some digital hands raised, that would be awesome because every time we get together, we want to do business together. Just like community, it's only good if you're doing it together versus suffering in that silo. And quite frankly, let me be very transparent with you. Business ownership can be an unbelievably lonely place at times. I won't tell you that it's going to be rainbows and unicorns. I will tell you from the last 10 years of business ownership, there have been a lot of times, especially in the beginning, where I felt that I was suffering in silence because I needed to keep it all together. And so if you're here tonight, just know that you don't have to be in that place. You can join the community, but also be a part of something bigger than yourself. So let's go ahead and get Asha unmuted.
Hey, so after our call yesterday, I started off my day going through my emails and going through QuickBooks like I usually do to make sure I reconcile the accounts more on a daily basis so that Tim and Matt can look at things. And I actually ended up following up with one of our clients because we have about 46,000 outstanding invoices that we need to collect on before the end of the month, which would be nice to have right now.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I did was actually called because I don't like calling. I don't like calling on collections or anything. And I've been in that job before, specifically doing that. But I called, left a message, then I jumped on our team call. Then she immediately sent me an email during that team call saying, "Hey, I'm going to get this taken care of." So it was a lack of communication that allowed for this to go up longer than 45 days. So I think taking just the proactive approach of just calling instead of just relying on email proved to be a little bit better today. So Tim, I'm working on it to keep making those collections so that our numbers look better. But I think that was a win just in general to just remind ourselves that we need to be calling clients sometimes instead of just relying on email or text messages for that correspondence.
Well, one, I think it's anytime we can make finance happy, that's a win. The other side, and I just want to be very, like, I don't know, let's put it all on the altar tonight. Why is it that we feel bad calling clients that we have done work for the money that they owe us and have committed to us? You're not the only one, Asha, and I appreciate you saying it, but you're not the only one. And I want to just put myself in the batter's box of saying that I have struggled to make those same calls, but people that appreciate the work that we've done already, generally speaking, don't have a big problem giving us the money that they know that we deserve and that we've already earned. So I I appreciate your vulnerability, but you're not alone. So kudos for you to making those calls. I know it's uncomfortable, even if you know you're owed the money that you've already earned. But it's just there's something that goes into shifting from text and email to actually picking up the phone. So Love that. Love the fact that we've got $47,000 that's owed to us that we just have to ask for. We've already earned it. We just have to ask. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that because I am positive that there are more than just you on this call that know that that is a true opportunity of closing the loop on money we've earned. Let's get Bob unmuted.
How are you?
Oh, better than I deserve. Holy
You know
smokes.
our saying. I won't say it a lot here.
Well, I can tell you right now, and I'll share this with everybody. When
Inside joke.
Bob comes into a situation, Bob lives like maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles from the beach. And so any situation that he comes into, it's this doesn't suck.
It doesn't suck. Got to laugh on everybody. So the win would be, we had a meeting today, and where I thought the company was, and we're only on week 5, I think, going into week 6 since I've signed up with you guys. But where I thought the company was not so much reality. And you guys came in, and thank you very much for traveling out to Florida, which it don't suck. Um, um, but anyways, putting in reality where the company's at, and now moving forward, it's been a week since you've gone, and I'll tell you, you could just feel it today from everybody in the office to the field. Just the momentum went from one way to the other to today, even down to I showed up at the field and the crew was like, "Hey, everything's coming together. You need to go land some bigger jobs," which I'm not sure I've even heard that out of any of them in 20 years. And I was just like, the energy's there. So I just got to tell you, I can't thank you all enough for everything you've done. My spirits are high. At one point I was thinking, oh boy, here we go. And I know we talked about some different things in rough roads, but I got to say, knowing you guys are behind me, and if I didn't have you behind me, I would be a little nervous, but having you guys behind me, knowing that you're a phone call away, a text, or a problem solver, you guys are a blessing. So signing up with you guys is my biggest win ever. So thank you all.
I love hearing that. One, we are truly a phone call, a text, an email away. We're in this together. We are in the trenches. I want to thank you. If you were on the call last week, if you weren't, you're about to get a little bomb dropped on you. But Bob shared something that we are dubbing the mental million. Asha was a part of this conversation, and quite frankly, I think what you shared was incredibly valuable for everybody on the call. Whether it's 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, depending on your SKU, depending on the value proposition, depending on your industry, depending on your revenue model, we all have a mental million that we all want to get past that first kind of snapback moment in our business where if we could just get past that, we know that the rest of it, we can build process and systems on top of the foundation and start to fortify our business. And Bob, you shared kind of 3 to 5 million was your mental million. And I think that's great context for everybody in this community of not just looking at what it's like to earn your first million, but what is your mental million? What does that truly look like? Maybe you're in construction like Bob, where $1 million is 4 contracts, and that's not the mark. Maybe for Bob it's 3 million, but maybe you're in marketing or sales or consulting or whatever your industry is, and maybe $1 million is truly your $1 million revenue mark. But I think it's important, and I took it to heart last week when you shared that 3 million is really your 1 million mental million mark. And so whether you join us as 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 30 million, doesn't matter. What is your mental million mark that you know that I have found something that I can provide incredible value to the market, but also turn that into enough value proposition, enough profitability to where I can be truly generous with what money I have made and the profitability that I'm generating to make an impact on the community that I serve, not just with my business, but with my self-interest. So with that being said, I am so excited. We've been talking about this topic for the better part of the last week, and so I'm really excited to have AJ, Tim kind of share these two perspectives, if you will. AJ coming in with really the five profit leaks or the money leaks that will bankrupt your business, and then dovetailing that into something that I think everybody on this call can benefit from, pivoting to Tim in the annual planning process. As we get into the midpoint, which sounds crazy to me to even say, but the midpoint into Q4 of 2024, how are we going to not only look at the data from 2024, but how are we going to leverage that data to put us into a better situation in 2025 and use that data as a launching off part to Q1, Q2, and then the latter part of 2025. So with that being said, I want to welcome our CEO, our founder, and truly the visionary behind everything that we're doing here at All True Partners, AJ Adams.
All right. Now, question. Have you ever looked at your business and thought, where is all my profit going? Have you ever made more revenue year over year, quarter over quarter, month over month, but seen less money in your bank account? Your profit is not growing, your cash is not growing in proportion to your revenue. If you say yes to any of those, which probably all of you at some point have or you currently are, what I'm going to show you here is going to reveal why that is. And when we do these business builders calls, our goal and the intention is to give you actionable strategies, not to talk high level concepts to positions so we can pitch you something. There's nothing to buy on this call. It's to give you tangible, actionable insights and strategies that you can implement immediately. So as we end 2024 and we're moving into 2025, which I agree with Kirk, it's crazy to think we're so far into the year already and we have a whole another year coming. But good things have happened, depending on where you stand with certain things. I'm excited for the next 4 years. I'll just put it out there. And if that offends you, too bad, you decided to be here. There's going to be some great opportunity, and what we want to do is position you to really capitalize on that. And that means that think of it like business is like a race. And if you're going to go into another year, which is another 12-month race, you can't go in with the same race car. And I've been learning about race cars from Kirk because he's a big racing fan. And a couple of weeks ago, we went to NASCAR, and we actually sponsored. I wish I didn't think about this earlier. I'm just speaking off the top of my head like I do, and the team loves when I do that because they never know what I'm going to say or what we're going to have to edit out later. We sponsored a race car, and so we had 3 different spots in the car, and we had the prime spot, which is like right on the back of the car. So when you get that shot when the cars are racing, we had some TV coverage, and it was really cool. But I asked Kirk, like, what's the difference? Like, why is one car in the 30th pole position or 30th place when they start, another car's in the first position? Like, what determines that? And it's how they qualify. Well, what makes one? Is it the driver? Is it the car? And what he told me was, to some degree, it's the driver, but in reality, probably 80-90% of the performance is the car, and specifically the engine. So I'm going to show you here, and I'm using the illustration of cash flow and pipes. So don't judge my drawings. I'm not an artist. I'm a strategist, so bear with me. But what makes the difference is the engine. So if you look at a car that's in like the first 10 spots in NASCAR, they're running a $65,000, $80,000 engine. The guys who are in the further back positions, especially like the 30s, they're running a $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 engine that was sold to them, but after the 1 through 10 spots, we're done using it. Like they'll use the engine for 1 to 2 races. All of the other guys will use it for like 3, 4, 5 races. So what I want to help you do in this call is improve the performance of your machine, your business, so it runs on a better engine. And one of the simplest things you can do is plug the money leaks. So there are 5 money leaks, and number 3 is going to surprise you. Number 3 will probably be the most memorable that you'll have. So what I want you to do, if you're we're streaming live on Facebook, so if you're on Facebook, drop a comment, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have questions, you can drop them. I'll be able to see that, and we'll answer those questions. And I want this to be interactive as always. But how many of you, just by drop a yes in the chat, you're ready to dive into this and learn what the 5 money leaks are so we can plug these and stop leaking profit? All right, so revenue. The first money leak in your business is operational inefficiencies. So when we go into a business, the first thing we look at, and that's primarily Heather and Tim. Tim will start with looking at the financials. If you look at your money, where your money is coming from, where it's going, where you don't have visibility, what you're going to find is it's always the byproduct of operational inefficiencies. That's why the first thing we do is we do a financial audit. So sometimes we'll go on site into a business. Bob was one of our clients that we went on site with, and we just jumped in and we looked at all the finances. With every client we do this, sometimes we'll go on site. But what we're looking for is what is the story that the money is telling, because data doesn't lie. And when you want to know what's going on with your business, you can ask your team, you can ask your employees, you can ask consultants, but they're going to make assumptions unless they operate the way we do, which is we look at the data, the one thing that always tells a true story. And the question is, well, when I look at the data, what am I looking for? You're looking to see what story the data is telling and what the data tells you that you need to further look into. So, operational inefficiencies. Really what this comes down to is I want you to think of it this way. We've all heard this saying that time equals money. I want to expound on that for you in this specific context. The more time it takes you to complete an operation, the more money you're losing. The less time it takes you, the more money you're making. So, delivering on your product or service, completing a project, whatever the deliverable is, the faster you can do that, the less man hours, the less resources, the more profitable you'll be. So this is the first place that you can look. If you have revenue, but you don't have the cash that you know you should have in your business, it's most likely that you have operational inefficiencies. And the reason why this is number 1 is because it's often the simplest, easiest to find, and it's the fastest to fix. Now, there are different varying degrees of operational inefficiencies, but it's a great place to start because you can quickly improve a process, create a new process to fix that. So I want you to think about your business. Are you tracking how long it takes you to deliver your product or service? If you're not tracking it, then you guarantee to have operational inefficiencies. And we track from the point of the first conversion point, which is a lead, through to the sale, so the sales cycle. And depending on your industry, there's industry averages. This is why you need to track data, because you have to look historically to know where you're starting. If you've never tracked this, and in fact, I'll ask, how many of you are tracking your lead to conversion, your sales cycle? How many of you know how long it takes someone to go from opting in as a lead to converting and paying you money? All right, so Asha says it's tracked in HubSpot, but don't look at it as much. So these are things that you want to look at really on a monthly basis, depending on how much activity, but a monthly basis at minimum, you want to look at this. Because if you know that your sales cycle is on average 30 days, if you have a higher ticket service, once it gets past 30 days, you need to have another process for that follow-up so that you can convert that, or you need to move on from it. Estimates. We are working with a client, and we know that their estimates typically take 2 weeks to close. From the time the estimate is delivered to the contract signed, about 2 weeks. So we can create a process that after 2 weeks, it gets moved to a different team or gets moved into an automated follow-up process so that you maintain efficiency and you don't have actual man hours on that. So that's the first one. The second money leak is low producing employees. Now I want to clarify this. There's low producing employees, and then there's there's two reasons for low producing employees. Either because they are low performers, or again, we had this situation 2 months ago with a client who were helped doing a turnaround in their business. They had employees that were great and they were forward thinking. They hired great people. The problem was, though, that those great people were not necessary in the business. So in other words, there wasn't enough demand to justify their salary. And this is where you have to see the data, because that's an operational efficiency. You have too many employees for the revenue that you're currently generating, and you don't have enough demand to increase the revenue generation to justify having that many employees. So what we had to do, unfortunately, was we had to rank all the employees, top performers, lower performers, and we cut the lower performers so that we had top performers. And another specification I want to make here, or distinction, is that there are two types of ways you need to look at revenue. Now, you might ask the question, well, AJ, what about our accountant? They don't generate revenue. Our salespeople generate revenue. I generate revenue by bringing in deals and relationships, but not every employee generates revenue. And we like to use, depending on the industry, somewhere between about 100, 150,000 and 500,000 in revenue per employee. And this depends on your industry. Construction, it needs to be higher. If you're doing 50, 60% margins, it can be lower. But you want to know this number. And what you're looking at is an average across all your employees. There are revenue generating employees, that's salespeople. Those people that are directly delivering a product or service. And then there are revenue managing employees. So your finance team, your accountants, your customer support staff, they're managing, ensuring that the revenue is coming in. So it's important to know the difference between the two and to evaluate them based on that. If you got salespeople, if within 90 days they're not producing what they should be producing in terms of revenue, you cut them loose, you move on, you replace them. That's why sales is such a high turnover, because they're not managing anything. Their job is strictly to bring the revenue in. So question, how many of you, when you think about it right now, you don't have to put it in the chat, we don't have to expose anybody, but how many of you already know, I've got some employees who are not producing at the level they should? And when it comes to revenue managing employees, are they managing the way that they should? Are they being efficient? Which goes back to operational inefficiencies. And this is why having KPIs, knowing how to gauge performance of your employees is important, but you can't do that if you're not tracking the KPIs, tracking their performance. What specific metrics do you have to track that? Because if you don't have that, that's an operational efficiency, and it won't allow you to evaluate if they're a high producing, average producing, or low producing employee, which leads to further operational efficiencies. So now you see how these are all connected. Does that make sense? Give me a yes in the chat if that makes sense. Awesome. Okay. Number 3. This one's gonna be fun. So a little story. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about the little foxes, and it's actually Song of Solomon, and it's talking about relationship marriage. And what it says is that it's the little foxes in the garden that destroy the garden. Now, why does it say little foxes? Well, you think about a tomato plant. My wife got really into gardening, and we had tomatoes out there. We got basil, which in Arizona, basil just grows like weeds. It's amazing if you love basil, which I do. When you have a tomato plant, you have to trim it and prune it the right way, because the nutrients flow from the soil. I'm gonna give you a little gardening lesson. All right, what is this? With the botany? Is that what it is? Plantology. The nutrients come from the soil, they go up through the stem, and then they go out. So you're gonna trim whatever's not producing. That way the nutrients can efficiently go where they need to go. This is the very same principle. When you have a garden and foxes, or even in Arizona we have lots of rabbits, they're not tall, so they can't get to the way that they would trim these tomato plants was so that the fruit was high up, so that the little rabbits and foxes couldn't get to it. So, and the big foxes would be kept out by the fencing. Well, the little foxes, the little rabbits would dig under, they would sneak their way in because they're so small. And because they couldn't reach the fruit higher up, they would nibble at the roots. And nibbling at the roots is what would kill the plant. So when you think about your revenue, I want you to remember this phrase: foxes in your COGS, your costs of goods sold. The foxes are the little expenditures that are just bleeding your profit. This is little expenses. And we do a lot of work with home services businesses. And in that space, you have a lot of crews. They get up in the morning, they load up the truck, they go to the gas station, they fuel up, get water, get ice for the day, and then they go off to the job. Well, if you don't have controls in place, what is going to happen, what we've seen happen time and time again with many clients, is the crew goes into the gas station, they get energy drinks, they get a pack of smokes, they get snacks, $10, $20 a piece, $100 a day. Well, over time, this equates to thousands and thousands of dollars. Now imagine if you've got 20 people on a crew, every one of them is spending an extra 20 bucks a day, that's $400 a day. You, over the course of a month, say 20 working days, that's, what is that, $8,000. Over the course of the year, you just lost $100,000, ate into your profit. And if you're doing $1 million, or let's say you're doing $3 million, you're operating at 20%, that means that you're doing, what is that, 600,000? No, that's not 600,000. Where's the accounting team? You're right there, just tell me. 20% of 3 million. Yeah, it's 600,000. So you're losing a good portion of your profit. So you want to look at these little things. Look at your credit card statement. If you're noticing little transactions that don't make sense, start investigating that. And I guarantee you, add them up. Even in just everyday life, this is how people go broke. Spend Starbucks every single day, little expenditures, $5 here, $10 here. That subscriptions that are $20 a month that add up. So all of these little things that you're not tracking, that you don't have controls for, this bleeds a ton of money. And the bigger your business gets, the more people you hire, the more people that have access to a credit card or petty cash, expensing things for travel, whatever the business is, the more you're losing. So your growth in your team and your revenue actually equates to more little foxes, and that's where you have no profit, even though your revenue has grown. Does that make sense? How many of you know right now you got some little foxes in your cogs? Just drop a yes in the chat. You got some little foxes. Yep, 100%. Yeah, that gas station, it's not just the gas that's costing a lot. It's all the little things. All right, so let's move on. Number 4, inflated salaries. Now, number 5, this is about your employees, but number 5 is going to be about you owners. So grit your teeth, prepare, put a helmet on, because that one might sting a little bit. Inflated salaries. Don't just make up salaries. Kirk will tell you this. He does a good amount of research, and he researches not just what the salary should be for that specific role, but what should the salary be for that specific role in that specific market based on cost of living, inflation, all of those things. Kirk and I were both at a firm together where we both got promoted into leadership level positions where we were directing departments. We were leading and building a department. And he said something to me one day, and I resonated with it. He said, getting promoted actually costs me money. I'm now making less because of inflation. So you've got to think about that with your people. Kirk likes to say when it comes to HR, don't mess with people's kids or their money. And sometimes you can be overpaying people. So you really got to think about when you're hiring, you're setting salaries, have you done the research? Do you know what you should be paying that person? If you underpay them, they're not happy. They're not performing. If you overpay them, they're not performing, but they don't care because they're getting overpaid. So you've got to look at that, and are your salaries, do they make sense for that specific role? If they're revenue producing, and your structure. What's the structure of base salary versus incentive, bonuses? These are the kind of strategies that we teach our clients, because if you don't do this correctly, this can just be lots of money lost. Heather right now is working with a company and their accounting where they've got a staff accountant who's making $100,000 a year and doesn't have the skills, the basic skills of an actual accountant. So she's way overpaid in this company, and Heather's made the recommendation, you need to let her go, you need to replace her, find someone who has actually has the skills, and you can actually pay them the same, or you can pay them even a little less if they're younger and looking for experience, and there's a great opportunity because it's just losing money. So this is another area where money just leaks in inflated salaries. Now, before I go to the last one, I want to temperature check. Are you guys ready for this last one? Because this one's going to sting a little bit, specifically for those of you who are business owners. Can you fix overpaying? That would be a question for Kirk. So, actually, Kirk, let's take a moment. Let's answer that question because that's a great question. The answer is yes, you can fix it, but Kirk will speak to how you fix that because you can't just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, we're paying you too much, so we're gonna cut your salary." Don't mess with people's kids. Don't mess with their money.
I couldn't agree more. The reality is, yes, you can fix it. It's not an overnight fix, though. It is one of those things that we want to build a bridge between where they are and where they should be. So whether that's through incentive comp or in a commission-based structure, you can allow them the opportunity to make more money in a different structure, or if you find out that they have an inflated title or an inflated salary, there's an opportunity for us to, through coaching, through an ability to really help them understand where they are, but more or less where they want to be, mapping that out for them. So it's very collaborative. It's a conversation and not just a dictation of, well, I found out you're making too much money and now I'm going to right size that thing and I'm going to take $10,000 or $20,000 out of your salary because, well, I found out I'm overpaying you. It really comes down to where did we get the information? What's the quality of the information? And then how do we right size that by having a conversation and then building a bridge between where they are, where you need them to be, but then where you want them to be. Ultimately, it comes down to where their goals are aligned professionally and financially, and how do we get them to those goals faster, but in a way that's financially aligned with the overall goals of the organization.
Awesome. Yeah, so based on what Kirk said, another question to ask is not only are they overpaid, but are they incorrectly compensated? Do you have the wrong structure in place? That's another question to ask from what Kirk said. So the final one, and then we're going to talk annual planning and how this all fits in. Everybody say, ouch. Just take a minute, let it sink in. Owner distributions. Now this is looking at your salary, but also looking at what are you taking out of the business. Now, when we talk about flow, if we have really efficient operations, we've got our employees producing what they should produce, we have salaries that are appropriate, we don't have all of these foxes in the cogs, then we look at owner distributions. Because at any point, this is where it can get all bottled up. Usually, right here is where it gets the worst. And it can be the most complicated to fix because looking at your cogs, you don't necessarily control all of the costs. You might have to have more complex strategies, diversify your vendors, your suppliers, put in more controls. It takes a little more time usually to fix this once we identify it. That's why we start with operations, then we look at performance of employees, then we look at salaries, and then we'll go to your cost of goods sold. But where between your cost of goods sold and your owner distributions, this is the most difficult to fix. Why? Because now we're touching your money. And you just have to be unselfish and think about it this way. At L2 Partners, we've set our salaries based on our growth goals. And now, it's not as much as I want to make. It's not what I know I'm worth. But I'm not looking at my business as a piggy bank that I just pull money out of like a little kid every time I want to buy something. My business needs to grow. So going back to the illustration of a garden, if you treat your garden like I'm just going to take what I want and eat it, and you're not strategic, you'll kill that garden. So when we're in our little garden that we have outside, when we're harvesting, my wife has taught me from all her research, because she really enjoys doing this, how to properly harvest so you don't hurt the plant. Because if you harvest incorrectly, you will kill the next harvest. So you always have to think of your business, and when you're taking money out, you're taking distributions, ask the question, am I leaving enough so that I can come back? And I'll use another example that is even more profound. There is and this is coming from the Bible, always a great source for wisdom. In that culture, when they would harvest, they would always leave 10-20% of the harvest behind. They wouldn't harvest everything. Even if it was they're completely harvesting the entire crop, they would leave some behind. And the reason they would do that is because there were people, the poor, those who were downtrodden without, they would come and they would leave that for them. Think about that same concept in your business. You have to leave enough so you can continue to invest in your business. And as an owner, we've had owners do this. We've told them, look, you've got to not pay yourself for the next few months. Your business is hurting for whatever reason. It's not necessarily always that they were taking too much out of the business, but you're going to have to not pay yourself. You're going to have to bite the bullet, buckle down, and leave the money in your business because your business is starving. You can't starve your own garden. You've got to leave enough in that. And you got to think long term. You don't need a Lamborghini. You don't need to buy the yacht. You don't need to buy the new car. You can be like Warren Buffett and drive a beater car for as long as you can. Run that thing into the ground. But to make it easier, set a goal. When I hit this certain level, then I'm going to buy this thing. My thing is, there's a pickup truck that I really want. I'm not a Lamborghini guy. I'm not 20 years old with people that I'm trying to impress that I don't even like, buying things I don't need. I want a truck. I want a Ford Shelby 750 horsepower GT truck. And Tim's a car guy, and he said, that's not a truck. That's a race car shaped like a truck. You don't need that much power. I said, I do. Because when the apocalypse happens, I need to get going fast. I want that. Now it's a $200,000 truck. So I've set a goal to grow the business to a certain point where I can then do that. So set as a goal, set as a trophy. The problem is so many business owners want to flex. They want to look like they're more successful than they are, and they're not comfortable looking broke. Look broke, stay broke, act broke, live broke. Damon John even wrote a book called The Power of Broke. That mentality, act like you have no money, because the guys who are out there buying $5,000 Rolex because they got $1 million business, I mean, there's 20-year-olds. They make $1 million a year in revenue, not income, revenue, and they're buying a Rolex. Who are you trying to impress? If you want to impress, build a great business that's highly profitable, has lots of cash, because then it will get to the point where you can't pull enough out of it. It's just producing too quickly. So that's the final leak, money leak, is your distributions and what you're paying yourself. And I'll give you this, I'll give you a little gift. If you talk to your tax strategist, you can even talk to Tim, for those of you who are working with us, there are strategies you can use to where you can pay yourself very well. Because going back to inflated salaries, it's not just what you pay yourself, it's how you pay yourself. Example, we were working with a client a couple years ago who's a dentist. Dentists get paid pretty well when they have, even, he was doing about $3-4 million a year. He was paying himself $1 million, like 1.2 million per year. That was his salary. Now, that sounds great until you look at it and realize if he's paying himself a $1.2 million salary, he has to pay taxes on $1.2 million. But if he paid himself $100,000 a year and then strategically took distributions and did it the right way, he could avoid a lot of that tax and losing a lot of that money. So he could actually afford to take less and leave more in the business while still paying himself more. There are strategies to get what you want, and that's why you have to treat business not like a piggy bank, but it's something you cultivate. You're managing the flow, so you have less of your revenue being lost at these junctures and more of it ending up in profit. Because at the end of the day, profit is what matters. Revenue is insanity, profit is sanity. If you have a $10 million business doing 20%, that's not impressive. If you have a $5 million business doing 50-60%, now you're in a really good spot because now you can afford to grow. So what did that, was that valuable? Does that give you more clarity and confidence around why you may not be seeing the profit that you know you should be seeing within your business? Just drop a yes in the chat or no. Let me know. Be honest. If you got no value at all, I want to know that. Mark says definitely. That was great. Awesome. All right. So let's shift gears. I'm going to pass it over to Tim. And now let's talk through some of the concepts of annual planning, because your annual plan is based on wanting to grow. Fix these things, and if they haven't been fixed, you know where you have money leaks. Part of your annual plan should be how you're going to address and attack fixing these leaks and plugging them up so you get better flow and more of your revenue flows down to your profit.
All right, thanks AJ. How's everybody doing? I'm gonna take the smiling faces as everybody's doing great. Thoroughly enjoyed the theatrics earlier in the call. Definitely a first time for that. All right, so as we kind of start talking annual planning, particularly as we enter the holidays, this is Christmas time for finance and accounting folks. It's definitely one of those times when we sit down, we're like, okay, what do we want to have happen in the future? What do we need to do in order to cause that to happen? So we're talking a lot more from a scenario analysis standpoint of what do we want to have happen? Okay, annual planning. One of the first things we're doing when we're looking at annual planning is actually reviewing historicals, looking back, sitting down and saying what happened in the last 12 months, or ideally the last 24 months, what went really, really well and what went really, really poorly, and identifying what problems exist in my business that I cannot have reoccurring in the future, and how can we attack that rather quickly, particularly for business that, let's just say, are working through some of the problems that AJ just talked through, and they have a problem where they've got a leaky bucket. One of the first things you do through annual planning are sit down and actually, how can I fix that? And identify, when can I fix that? How long will it take me to fix that? Because we want to have that understanding as we're building out what our monthly and quarterly targets are. We want to have that understanding of, okay, if I have to take 6 months to fix this operational problem, then I can't cause rapid growth in my business until that has happened. That way, again, when you're causing growth into your business, you also run the risk of having your business collapse if you don't have enough structure in place or foundational elements in the business. And so it's always one of those things that we are looking at, what do we want to have happen, and how can we make sure that at all costs it's going to happen, because everything is in place for it to happen, from an investment standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, from a people standpoint, having the right skill sets in the business, and making sure that everybody is paid fairly and compensated for exactly what value they bring into the business. That's a lot. But let's actually talk through from just a dollar figure revenue number. How do we set targets? Most people, again, most CPAs set targets based off of what historical growth has been. If you've grown by 5%, they'd expect you to grow by 5% forever. Also, some consulting groups will set 3 to 4 targets based off of an algorithm or a formula. But ultimately, what we're looking at is the law of averages when we start looking at growth rates. For Altru and most of the Altru clients, we base our growth rates and those targets based off the compounded annual growth rate. It's a fancy finance term, but if we explain it based off your sample set for the last 24 to 36 months, what it really means is based off of yearly basis, how much am I growing, and annualize that out. So if you grew in your first year, say 2020, and you grew by 50%, and then in your second year, you grew by another 50%, between those 2 years, you've grown by 50%. So your compounded annual growth rate is 50%, which means as you're projecting into the future, you have a good basis to expect that you would grow by 50%. Now, this is where it differs between CPAs. CPAs would just take that 2 years and say, okay, you grew by 50% in the last year, you're going to grow by 50% again. Whereas with the compounded annual growth rate is if you add another year into that sample size, and let's just say you grew by 25% or 30%, then your compounded annual growth rate is actually dropping. And now for the finance guys, we're like, that causes concern. What happened? Why aren't we growing as fast? We've proven historically that we were growing. And so we should be more economical. We should look at the business with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb and actually look, where are we leaking? Why aren't we growing? And ask those questions through the annual planning process. So that's really why we use the annual plan, the compounded annual growth rate. We talk about that a lot. It's one of the financial terms that I ask the team to learn, and I already put it in the chat, because again, it is very paramount to how we project into the future what we want to have happen, particularly as we're looking at what turnaround are we trying to cause in the business and where are we trying to cause that growth in our revenue streams. So revenue targets. Once we have an understanding of what our compounded annual growth rate is, we actually sit down and we try to outline 3 to 4 targets. And again, the reason it's 3 to 4 targets is particularly if we're going through a turnaround or an event where in our current year, we have a rather slow period that is actually slower than historicals. We actually want to have one plan, which is our 4th plan, that is, what if it takes longer than anticipated in order to correct and hit our growth rate again? And then, of course, the 3 other plans are an optimistic plan, best case scenario, what do we expect to have happen in the year? We have our realistic plan, what do we know is going to happen in the year? Where are we going to set that annual compounded growth rate? And of course, you have the conservative target. The reason we have the conservative target is this is where we actually try to budget all of our costs to. When we're budgeting, we're saying, okay, if our revenue is going to grow by 10%, then from a finance and accounting guy, I'm saying then we can't have increases in our fixed costs by more than say 5% unless we're going to allow our profit in the business to be eaten up by just increases in our fixed costs. Same thing with variable costs. We don't want to be in a position where our variable costs are growing faster than our revenue. It's always one of those questions of what is the sacrifice in order to cause growth? Ideally, in a perfect world, we are investing into the business. We're not sacrificing profitability. All right. One of the other things we really look at from a revenue standpoint is we're breaking down the goals by product or service revenue. What does the business do and how can we break it down to the simplest manner so we can project at that level? For some of you guys, you offer services, right? Handyman services, plumbings, HVAC, construction. Sometimes we want to look at that type of business based off of the zip code, right? How can we find a way to group our customers or group our activity into a specific area so that we can find levers in the business that allow us to push and pull across our business in order to cause growth in different areas? Sometimes it's service areas, sometimes it's specific customer relationships or that type of persona, and sometimes it's new markets, but it's identifying those levers. All right. The final step as we're really talking about revenue is the monthly and quarterly targets. Again, a lot of that is based off the growth rate, but when you're looking at the quarterly target, it is really based off seasonality. What is the expected seasonality for the year? How has my seasonality changed historically, whether over a 2-year or a 3-year sample size? And the reason we want to talk about seasonality is because as we're talking investments into the business or distributions as ownership, we want to make sure that we take cash out of the business or put cash into the business when appropriate based off of our revenue stream or really based off that seasonality we're expecting. Plus, it helps us understand rather quickly if we say that, hey, June is going to be our best month, or it's historically been our best month every year. When we sit down and we look at what actually happens in June, if it's not shaping up to be our best month in week 1 or week 2, we know we need to shift our focus and see what's going on. How quickly do we need to pivot? If June is not our best month, we have a problem. We need to look at what's going on. So that's why we also want to set monthly and quarterly targets. All right. The next step is really starting to talk about where are we increasing our budget or increasing our fixed costs in the business. We'll go through the last couple of steps fairly fast so we can have some questions. But as we're starting to talk CapEx, that is really just capital expenses or it's really operational expenses. Who are we hiring? What skill sets are we bringing into the business? What equipment are we bringing into the business in order to increase the value of the business or increase the value we're providing to clients? So for CapEx or equipment, we're identifying the current list that we already have and whether or not we're utilizing it as appropriately as we can or as efficiently as it can. Again, AJ mentioned making sure that all of your equipment or all of your people are as efficient as possible. This is something we look at during annual planning when we're looking at, do we actually need to hire or buy another piece of equipment? Are we as effective as possible? It's also making sure that we're buying the right piece of equipment for the right type of market that we're trying to grow into. Okay. And then we're also, again, looking at from a timing perspective, when is the right time to buy this equipment? When do I need it to be in service? Or same thing with people. When do I need that employee to be in service before looking at it and saying, okay, I need this person in 90 days. I need to start hiring them because I know my hiring time frame is 80 days and I want to have them onboarded and ready to go. And so that's really a lot of what we're planning is we're looking at annual planning. Again, that's why it's my favorite time of year because we're really building the business formula and identifying what actions are we taking for the rest of the year before it actually happens so that then throughout the year, all we have to do is, did this happen? Did this happen? This happened? Great. This is what we need to do next. And we have a list of, these are our targets. All right. This is where you guys, as the business owners, are really the CEOs of the business, the vision. This is where you guys come in. The final step when we're really looking at annual planning before we go any farther is identifying the vision. Does the next 12 months, based off of the formula, fit in with your vision, right? Oftentimes when we look at what is the purpose of the business, we're identifying a 36 or a 10-year plan. Again, 36, 3 months or 3 years, 4 years, and then also the 10 years. What do we want to have happen in the next decade? The reason this step happens in third is actually because we want to make sure that that vision, we may have to grow into it. Again, if you're a $10 million business and you want to be a $150 or $250 million business in 10 years, for the first 3 to 4 years, you might not be as profitable as you want. You might not be as efficient in your growth as you want because you're laying the foundation for what is a $150 million business. And so it's making sure that as we're going through this annual plan, it's not just saying, hey, the math says you're going to grow another 50%. It's making sure that that's the pain and the sacrifice that you want to have happen. Because otherwise, what we may want to do is slow the growth rate to a point where the stress as the business owner and the leadership team is something that you actually want long term. Because again, growing a business is stressful. Everyone knows it, but it's making sure that as we're looking at the growth we're trying to cause in our business, it's actually something that all parties are on board for. All right, it was a lot. The last thing we're going to leave you with is when we go to step 4, we actually start talking about what is the top-down approach versus the bottom-up approach. And what I mean by that is top-down. Everything I just walked you through was top-down. It is someone at the top explaining this is what we're going to do, A, B, and C. Bottom-up is you actually going to your employees or the leaders of your functions and saying, this is my target. What do you need from me in order to make it? And this is why, as you guys get bigger and you expand your leadership team, it becomes one of the more important or vital components of annual planning because it's teaching them how you think as business owners. And so as you go through the annual planning process with all true partners, one of the things that we do is we try to keep you heavily involved, not only from the top up, this is what needs to happen if we want to have growth, but it's also how do we communicate that this is our target, what needs to happen from your point of view. So that when you sit through this process and you're actually conducting it, we are very familiar with how these conversations go. All right, I'm going to pass it back to AJ or Kirk, and we're going to kind of run through any questions you guys might have. Again, annual planning, it's Christmas time for finance and accounting, guys, but it's definitely one of those things that we want to make sure that everyone knows how we're kind of walking through it. Is AJ still there?
I am here, and I'm
All right.
always willing to take the lead and the microphone back. With that being said, I know that you shared a lot. I always say that you heard a lot of things, you listened to a lot of things, but what did you actually understand? What questions do we have going into annual planning coming out of the conversation with Tim? There is no way that nobody has any questions because I feel like I have questions every time Tim speaks. So let's go to the chat. John Scully says thoughts on quarterly planning versus annual planning. We'll throw that one back over to you, Tim.
So that's my favorite answer. It depends. Ultimately, as you're going through annual planning, you will indirectly create a quarterly plan. And the reason it depends is if you have a 3-month business cycle or even a 6-month business cycle and your business changes a lot, then doing a quarterly plan makes a lot of sense. Again, with all true partners, we do both. We will do an annual plan with you. And then a lot of what we're doing throughout every single quarter is aligning 180 days. And so we then break it down to what needs to happen in 6 months. And then in order to have those 6 months targets accomplished, what needs to happen in 3 months. And then of course, if we're doing it by 3 months, we're going to break it down to a month, what needs to happen in this next month. And then as we're kind of talking through that, we basically already break down what needs to happen every single week. And so we have our targets. Does that answer the question, John?
We got a head nod. I think that's a big affirmation to really the financial backing to us doing really 30-day increments, but ultimately 180-day kind of shots or plans. We call it a business action plan. It's 180 days. It is really our attempt to get laser focused on the things that need to be done immediately. I think we've all kind of come from either firms or I know from my background, we would do in a previous situation, we did 4-year lookouts. We've done 10-year lookouts. The reality is that if we focus on 6 months, and this is where myself and this team got the most growth in portfolio management, and management is a generous term. We did less managing and more just pound the pavement and get the results that we wanted. But we took that portfolio from $90 million in revenue to $190 million in revenue in a little less than 24 months. And that wasn't by sitting back in the background and hoping that things got done. It was really a matter of, let's put together an annual plan, but ultimately we're putting together these 90 and 100-day blitzes. And that's really how we structured every 365 days. Was this is the 90-day and this is the 180-day target, and we're going to pound it from all 4 functions of the business and come at it full-fledged. And quite frankly, we take the scoreboard of the results of each one of our clients' businesses to heart. And so you might take it personally because it's yours, it's your business, you started it, whether it was a vision or something as a family business that you kind of stumbled into, doesn't matter for us. Each one of those clients is very personal, and it's a scoreboard. The results are genuinely a scoreboard of results that we can say, okay, this is what we did over the last 90 days. This is what we did over the last 180 days. And then we pound it and say, hey, this is the results that we had. Did we win? Did we lose, or we stay neutral? And as long as we are continuing to win, we'll continue to use those same strategies. When it goes to neutral or loss, that's where we're looking at the playbook and saying, okay, where is it that we can change our tactics, change the way that we're doing it, or really just wholesale look at what is working and what is not working over the last 30, 60, 90 days, and then we go and attack the next quarter together. So I love that Tim shared that. I love the question for sure. As we go into 2025, I want you to each be thinking through, what is it that I want for the end of 2025? What does it look like over the next 12 months? What does that result look like? Maybe it's professional development. Maybe it's leadership development. I'll tell you that in the last 6 months, the number of clients that we have worked with, not only the business owner, but their management team, that just hunger and thirst for leadership development. Maybe it's leadership development. Maybe it's financial development. But whatever it is, wherever you want to develop over the next 12 months, really look at that. I would take the next couple of weeks, as we have, I believe, 5 or 6 weeks left in 2024. As you're looking at those 6 weeks, really get laser focused on where you want to develop personally, professionally, and financially. Bring those into the annual planning of your business, and let's attack those things together. With that, I know we went over a little bit of time, but hopefully it was of value, answering your questions, getting things a little bit more ironed out going into 2025. We are taking next week off to give thanks and a little bit of giving. Hopefully, if you don't already have plans on giving from your successes this year, figure it out. I would encourage you to look at organizations in your local community. I'll brag a little bit, if you will, on Bob. Bob has taken advantage of an opportunity to support putting together these Thanksgiving dinners for families in need. I will tell you that it's been a subject of our last couple of strategy meetings, actually. And so whatever that looks like, make sure that you are giving thanks in perpetuity of the success that you have already experienced, or the success that you're creating going into 2025. But this is an incredible season. I'm one of those weird people that think that Thanksgiving is better than Christmas, but maybe that's just coming from a parent that has to buy the presents. But Thanksgiving is an incredible time. It's an incredible reset mentally and spiritually and emotionally for myself and my family. And so as we go over the next 2 weeks, we will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. And I hope everyone on this call and everyone that comes on the call in 2 weeks has incredible wins to share from how you hosted or were a gracious hospitality guest in your Thanksgiving festivities. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Have a great weekend.